Soldering InvariMatte is easy and can be done using many different techniques. Two of the more popular methods of joining are by lap seam or by mechanically fastening with rivets. We chose to show a riveted joint here, but the techniques are similar for soldering lap seams as well. Prior to joining the two pieces of InvariMatte together, we start by applying flux to the inside of the joint. A variety of fluxes are made for stainless steel, but Laco's MA stainless steel soldering flux is the preferred flux for soldering InvariMatte. After pre-drilling holes, we begin riveting the two pieces together. Either copper or stainless steel rivets can be used. We will be using stainless steel rivets here today. Next, we apply additional flux to the top side of the joint, thoroughly coating the rivets. The flux allows the molten solder to flow through the seam and the gap around the rivets, adhering to the stainless steel along the way. This makes for a watertight seal. Prior to soldering, we make sure that our soldering iron is heated to the correct temperature and properly cleaned. Today we are using a 60-40 blend of 60% tin and 40% lead because it will blend best with the InvariMatte, although a 50-50 solder will perform equally as well. We use the heat from our iron to melt the solder onto the InvariMatte. It is important to set your iron to the correct temperature for the type of solder you're using. If it is too hot, it can cause the solder to discolor, and too cold won't allow the solder to liquefy enough to penetrate the open areas. We work at a steady pace, making sure to thoroughly coat the rivets and seam with an even layer of solder. This view from the back side shows penetration of the solder through the joint. For large projects, pre-tinning can be done. Pre-tinning is the process of pre-applying solder to parts in order to improve the soldering process during the actual assembly in the field. This is often done using a solder pot like the one shown. Once our solder has had time to solidify, we clean the area with a mild degreaser and rinse with clean water. Another advantage to using Laco's MA stainless steel soldering flux is that it cleans easier than some of the more caustic fluxes available on the market today. This is important to note because any remaining flux residue will stain the InvariMatte and surrounding metal. If you see too much solder or little to no solder in the back side of the seam, you may have a poor seal in your joint. Little to no solder in the seam means that you may not have good penetration through the joint. Too much solder outside the seam means that all the solder may have pulled through the joint. You may also get a poor seal if you don't apply flux to the inside of the joint. As you can see here, the solder did not properly adhere to the InvariMatte because flux was not used inside the joint. Now let's take a look inside a good soldered joint. This cross-section shows us that we had good penetration through the joint. By peeling back the joint, we see that solder adhered properly to the InvariMatte. We know this because we have evidence of solder on both pieces. This tells us that the bond failed at the solder and not where the solder adhered to the InvariMatte. By applying flux to the inside of the joint, the solder flowed evenly and properly adhered to the InvariMatte. Examples of soldered InvariMatte can be found in a variety of places, such as Sam Houston State University's Austin Hall, located in Huntsville, Texas. The soldering was done on-site by Frank Brown Roofing. The soldered InvariMatte at the Hanover School in Connecticut was done by Roofer's Edge. The InvariMatte at the Lighthouse Keeper's residence in Sandy Hook, New Jersey was painted for historical accuracy. The soldering was done by Rising Sun Construction. More soldered InvariMatte can be found at the Willow School Wellness Center in Gladstone, New Jersey. The soldering was done by Strober Roofing and Sheet Metal. Jerry Strober was quoted as saying he prefers soldering InvariMatte over the tin and zinc coated stainless steel. You can learn more about InvariMatte on our website, and more information about soldering can be found at www.nickelinstitute.org.